Hey everyone, just going to talk for a moment or two while you all get connected and you all get set up. Hope everyone's very well today. You've all got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and you're ready to sit down and relax with us. For the next 60 minutes, I can see the participant count ticking up quite quickly, so I'll just give it a minute or two more before we get officially started. I'll do a small amount of housekeeping before we get started as well, in that the chat is disabled today, but we are taking questions live, and you're very welcome to put them in the Q&A at any time you like. I can still see the participant count ticking up quite fast. So for those of you that are just connecting to the audio, I'm just waiting for most people to be connected and settled in their seats and ready to hear us chat and chime in before we get going. So just give us a minute or two and then we will be ready. Just want to check one thing on my back end because I have closed Teams down, Ingrid. So I'm hoping that you've updated the set that you sent me before, which I've just refreshed. And you have, so that she's updated the set I've already got, so that's good. Good, let's have a look how we're doing. Well, still got people joining quite quickly, actually. So I think we'll just keep chatting for a minute. It's only 1 minute past the hour, so we'll give ourselves another 60 seconds or so. I don't want anybody to miss the start and feel that they've joined halfway through and you're pretty much on time. That's always a bit mean, and we can always chop this off later when we add the recording, which of course many of you will probably be wondering, are we recording the session today? And yes, we are, and yes, you will get a link to the recording later. But no doubt our incredible admin team will also put that in chat. Now, I think that number is changing slower. It's still changing, but it's slow. But I think it's slow enough that we can get started. So let's do that. Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're talking about DevOps for individuals and enterprises and building high-performing IT teams. I'm Helen Beale and I'm your host today. I am the head of the Ambassador Programme here at PeopleCert and delighted to be accompanied by three of our ambassadors, Avinash, Debashish and Donna today. We're going to do intros in a minute. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about the content that we're covering. So whether you're an IT professional aiming to grow your skill set or an organization looking to optimize performance, you're in the right place today. We're going to be exploring how DevOps can be the game changer for both individuals and enterprise success. So we've got a dynamic session ahead of us with our experts giving us their insights and sharing some real world case studies with us as well from the leading enterprises they've worked for and with. So stay tuned and get ready to get inspired. We are taking questions live today, so put them in the Q&A whenever you have them. But let's get to know us all a little bit better. So, as I said, I'm Helen Beale. I'm head of the Ambassador Programme here at PeopleCert. I'm just struggling to share my screen with you. So for some reason, it wouldn't let me get back to Zoom. So let's just do it this way. I'm head of the Ambassador Programme here at PeopleCert. I've been involved with the DevOps Institute part of PeopleCert since its very inception. I've taught the DevOps Foundation and Leader courses many, many times, been heavily involved with the production of those courses, along with Ambassador Donna, who's one of our very early ambassadors. And sorry, I've skipped to that slide. We'll go back to the others. When I started talking about the DevOps Foundation course and Leader course, I was like, well, Donna wrote the original version, of course, didn't you?
I did.
Tell us more about you, Donna.
So hi, everyone. I am the Curriculum Development Manager for ITSM Academy, which means I develop and maintain our course materials, and I'm very much a lifelong learner. So I think most importantly, it means I'm constantly being challenged to learn new things and understand new ways of working. I'm an ITIL master. I did author the DevOps Foundation course and hold, many other DevOps Institute certifications. And again, I'm an educator, I'm a lifelong learner, and so I love talking about the topic we're going to cover today.
Perfect. Welcome to the team today. And Avinash, since you're also on the slide, let's hear a bit more about you.
So I currently head consulting in India and the Middle East for Greyamp. We do a great amount of work helping companies achieve better business results. And in the world that we live in, a lot of that comes via what we're going to talk about in this session, which is DevOps.
Perfect. Welcome also. And let's also hear from Debashish. Let's tell us more about your role and what you do.
Hey, hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from where you're joining from. My name is Debashish and I go by Deb. Um, I am a DevOps enthusiast and also a brand ambassador at DevOps Institute. I lead the technology consulting practice at Opus Technologies. It's a payment tech company, and we work with financial tech companies and help them in their digital transformation pathways. And what do I say? I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about DevOps, which is one of my favorite topics.
Perfect. And we are very happy to have you here with us as well. So let's get started with the discussion. So today we're going to be talking about how DevOps helps both individuals and enterprises building high performance. So let's start by thinking about why DevOps matters both for the individual and for the organization. So maybe Avinash, why don't you start us off? Tell us what DevOps means to you as a kind of person, and then what it means to you within the organizations that you work with.
Uh, I think a lot of the value that enterprises need, that enterprises desire, comes from what I call intersectional skills. People have always been very good at doing parts of the jobs very well. It comes, I think, from the old manufacturing thing where you got six turns of the wrench, right? And in the beginning, and this was many years ago, obviously we've evolved. We brought a little bit of that in software. And I think what the DevOps movement has really done is bring different parts of the organization together. And it's the intersection of that which really drives a lot of the value in organizations, because those are the places where work tends to get stuck. If you think about it from a value stream perspective, and things like DevOps keep the value flowing, and that's from an enterprise perspective. But from a personal standpoint as well, and not just for me, but for many people in this community that I work with, it is the joy of actually seeing work moving faster, of value being delivered faster, of things going to production faster, right? Faster, smoother. Otherwise, there's nothing as frustrating as when you've got something but you can't get it live.
You certainly speak my language. I have a self-proclaimed mission, which is to bring joy to work. And actually, where I started with DevOps was in that frustration at that wall of confusion
Right?
between Dev and Ops, with the pain of doing release management. And that's where kind of that was my jumping point into DevOps was release management going horrible because of these kind of horrible like scripts that people were writing and stuff. And you also said the magic words value streams. So I'd love it if we come around to that as well. Um, Donna, what was it that attracted you as a person to DevOps, and how do you implement it in organizations?
So my I'll give you two examples. Number one, early in my career, I was introduced to Lean. I worked for a manufacturing company. And so it was very kind of exciting to me to see Lean principles coming back into the conversation, but in a very, very modern way. I got to dust off those Lean skills. But I also have spent a lot of my career working in the IT service management space. And so when I first started doing research for DevOps Foundation, and this goes back many years, the promise of not only speed, but speed and stability and quality and reliability and resilience, like the promise of being able to have it all was very, very fascinating to me. And really, that's what leaders want today, right? So that to me, that's the organizational benefit of it is that you really, the old adage, you can have it cheap or fast or good, pick two is
That
long
iron
gone. We
triangle.
want it all, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deb, what about you?
Well, I think the story goes back long time back. Again, like when I was an engineer and I was like, building applications left and right, there came a time wherein I started looking at silos, and like I think the industry is filled with silos. Like at every step there is, I mean, there are things that are important, but then they are supposed to be enablers and not exactly, become blockers. But then we've seen, let's say, for example, right, I've finished my work and my team is ready to go live, but then yeah, the security team comes and tells us to stop because we need to do testing, scanning, and blah blah blah. And that was always at the end of the cycle, right? So they are supposed to enable us, and what they're doing is essential, very essential, right? But then what we saw was, these there were these blockers, there were these silos that had to be broken down. And then came the time wherein like I saw a product in market, and we talked within the organization, shall we look at it? And we I mean, again, like I can name the product, but yeah, we did CI first time years back, and we were fascinated. Oh, this is very interesting. Now I can have everything together. And that was still early days. Okay, I think integrating unit testing was a big deal that time. And then we started seeing the benefits, and that's how I started getting interested in this area, because wow, I'm not only leading a team that is writing code and when building something, I can see things from an end-to-end perspective and help help kind of automate those things that are kind of hurdles or blockers in the value stream. And that's how I started my DevOps journey. It's been a long time. I'm still somebody who's very much on the application development side, but DevOps is like something that has always attracted me, because as I said, at the end of the day, I want to drive value for my customers. And like at the end of the day, I would want the user to be happy. They should have good user experience. And if you talk about user experience, you talk about two things, or rather three things: reliability, quality, and security. And DevOps actually helps you bring all of them together and deliver that to the customer.
So what's lovely about what you were just describing is it was very closely aligned in particular to what Avinash was saying, is that you saw in DevOps an opportunity to make your life much easier, but actually you were very focused on the customer experience as well. So there's the whole concept of total experience and the fact that the developer experience and the customer experience are very closely connected, and developers obviously do care very much about the work that they do. They don't kind of like just churn out code and not care that, there's a lot of pride in developers' work and what happens next with it. So it's all very connected. You also kind of talked about quite a few different subparts, if you like, of DevOps in there. DevOps being a very broad church now that originated, 15 plus years ago to connect developers and operations people when developers were going a bit more agile and IT operations people weren't. And we have very specific practices. You mentioned one there, CI. What I often find in this type of webinars when we have experts on is we tend to use not jargon, but acronyms or shortenings of concepts that we're very familiar with that the audience might not be quite so familiar with. So I wondered if we wanted to go back. You mentioned CI, for example, you mentioned it in the context of unit testing. So I wonder if you wanted to talk about what CI is as continuous integration, where unit test fits in, and maybe as far as it goes towards continuous delivery and deployment. Deb, since you mentioned CI, that one's for you.
Yeah. So again, like I think, yeah, thank you for that. I think that helps. I probably should have said continuous integration, but then in layman's term, let's say you write code every day and you check in. I mean, that's what the developers do, and the code finally would come together. Together in a single package, and the package will have all the features and the functionalities that you would give to your customers. Let's say you go to an e-commerce website, and you're looking at what options do you have, what do you want to buy. You select your stuff, put them in a cart, and then make the payment, and you have the product being shipped to you. That's the feature. That's an entire functionality. But to bring it all together, there is a lot of code that is written. Now, CI is the process that allows that code to be built together, packaged, and then it makes it ready in a state wherein it can be called as an artifact that can be delivered to the customer, or that can be deployed in a server that can be delivered to the customer. That whole process is CI. Now, there are several aspects to it. I mean, we can go very deep, but then if you look at it, writing and building code is one thing, but then to make sure that that code is written in the utmost level of quality and precision that is needed is another. So there are quality checks that are done. then the code has to be secure. It should not have any vulnerabilities. Now, if you look at today's world, developers don't reinvent things. There are a lot of libraries, open source libraries people have written that can be reused to activate a functionality instead of writing fresh code. So developers use all kind of open source libraries, and you need to make sure that those open source libraries are free from any kind of vulnerabilities. Look at what happened when there was a vulnerability in Log4j. We all know that. So you need to ensure that all the third-party libraries that you use are free from vulnerabilities. And in order to do that, you need to do something called software composition analysis scan, SCA scan. Then you have static security testing scan that can be integrated. Then there is like policies that can be applied. You have tools like OPA and all that can apply and make sure that your code is compliant with the policies that you have set in your organization. Then once the build is ready, you can containerize it so that you can deploy it into Kubernetes. And if that is the case, you can also do container scan that will make sure that your container or Docker container doesn't have any vulnerabilities. So there are a plethora of items and checks that you can do to ensure what you're delivering to the customer is of pristine quality and pristine security. And that whole cycle, that entire gamut of things that I spoke about together is continuous integration.
May I proffer just because that was quite a lot for somebody maybe on the call that hasn't heard it before. There was a lot in there, but what we're effectively doing is changing the way that we work. So we used to integrate very infrequently with very large batches of requirements, and we ended up with something called merge hell, where lots of problems would occur and it was really difficult to unpick. So the idea with continuous integration is that we're doing it continuously. So we've got these different branches of code, but we're taking them back to the trunk. Every time we, at least once daily from every developer. And as Deb's just described, every time we do it, we're doing these automated tests of different levels. So we're doing them at the unit level, the user acceptance level, and the integration test level as well. And then they're all what we call the functional tests. And then we have the non-functional tests, things like security. So that's continuous integration. When we do continuous integration, it puts us in a position where we can perform continuous delivery, which means we can deploy that code whenever we want, but we're going to do it manually. When we talk about continuous deployment, if we pass all those tests, it automatically gets delivered into production, which is like quite scary for a lot of people. And maybe we'll come back to that later. But one of the other reasons, Debs, I asked you to talk about that is because we talked now about like all these different disciplines, and actually me and Avinash mentioned value streams. Me and Donna talked about the DevOps Foundation course, the DevOps Leader course. We haven't talked yet about the AI Ops course, the SRE Foundation and Practitioner courses, the DevSecOps course. I know that we've got DevSecOps on the agenda. We kind of talked about security, so we're kind of going there already. But there's a whole plethora of skills that an individual could acquire. Let's start with Donna this time. Donna, if you join this call as somebody that's just heard of DevOps, maybe you're an ITIL master already, just heard of DevOps, and you're wondering what's the primary skill that you should get? How do you identify that?
The primary skill, I think there are certainly technical practices that you need to understand. But I'd actually like to answer one of the questions. I want to build on what Deb said, and I want to answer one of the questions, and I'm going to get the guys to kind of weigh in and add to what I say. But one of the questions was, at first sight, DevOps looks more like a promise. Can you please explain why it is faster? And so Deb talked a lot about the automation practices that come into play. So in terms of skill sets, being able to understand what the different tools are and what those different practices are is important. But the speed part comes in big part from DevOps roots, which are in Agile and Lean, both of which advocate for small chunks of work. So when I was first learning about DevOps and especially continuous delivery, like what are you talking about? People are going to automatically deploy things into production. I was a change manager at one point in my career, and I thought that was crazy talk. But when I really started to understand that what they're doing is pushing very small changes very, very quickly through the CI/CD pipeline, it really started to make sense to me. So again, the speed is not only coming from the automation practices, but in the mindset shift that came from Agile and Lean. Guys, do you want to add to that as well?
Also, what happens is that when we as a community got much better at pushing small changes really quickly, it also meant that you were able to take advantages of change, of that fast feedback, right? That you push something, you can see that it isn't working, you're responding to it in real time, and then you push in a different change to see if that makes it any better, right? Particularly in the e-commerce and e-retail space, uh, the market is such that it is pushing us to respond faster and faster to consumer behavior and customer behavior online. And the ability to, if something undesirable, and I don't mean from a code perspective or a functionality perspective, but from a user perspective, goes live, you could fix that in literally minutes rather than hours. The sophistication that's coming in is a lot to do with the automation that Debashish was talking about. But what I do want to say is that people who've just come in into the community shouldn't find that intimidating at all. A lot of that has now been nicely operationalized. A lot of them can be picked up and plugged in into pipelines. So I think the key thing for people is to focus very clearly on what they want to achieve. And what they want to achieve really drives the practices that they want to pick up in their organizations.
The mindset.
Yeah, very, very well said, Avinash and Donna, right? I think I'll also kind of piggy into both of your statements. When we talk about DevOps, primarily, we start with people, process, technology. People always comes first, and I think that's where it begins because for primarily to be successful here, what you need is the DevOps mindset, which is automation mindset. If you have automation first, I think you're already winning half the battle there. And one of the things that I read outside Harvard University once was only 10% of the successful professionals in the world are technically genius. That means 90% of the people who are successful have risen because they're good in their soft skills, and that is a very big key here as well in this arena of DevOps. Collaboration, communication, problem solving skills. And of course, I think, Donna, you talked about agility, being agile, and lean management. I mean, those a combination of those things are very key skills and very important things here as well.
If I may, it's very interesting what Donna just said, right? Because traditionally we tend to think of agile as being an effectiveness process, that it helps you be more effective. And you tend to think of lean as being making you more efficient. And here we are, and we are using both these. So we want to be effective and we want to be efficient. And we want to be both at the same time, which I think is a far greater change in emphasis than it would appear at first glance.
And let's talk about that. So we've talked a bit about the why already. So we've talked, Donna talked about the dissolution, if you like, of the iron triangle. So this idea that we're restricted and the fact that we can have it all. I actually came up with a golden square with the guy once because we put happiness on there as well. So we could have low cost, we could have high quality, we could have it at speed and have everyone happy. And that's like the promise of DevOps. And then you, Avinash, have just talked about something that aligns very closely to the work that I do with value streams, where we talk about flow, so the efficiency of the work, but also the effectiveness. So what Debs was saying about customer happiness, so the realization of the value that we're creating. So I'm sure the audience want to hear about this not just being theoretical, but they want to hear about this being something that's very practical. So I've worked with quite a few different types of organisations as a DevOps consultant over the last 15 years, from like the likes of Lego and Lloyds Banking Group and Elm in Saudi Arabia and Deutsche Telekom. And these kind of promises are real. So when we look at these value streams and we do things like automate the testing, or a great example from another smaller bank in the UK I work with, we had a big blockage, a big constraint around security. There was like a 6-week wait for a security response in the development life cycle. And what we did was They, like most organizations, had a very small number of security experts. So we talk often about this ratio of 100 to 10 to 1. So 100 developers to 10 IT operations people to one security person. It's not completely true in every organization, but proportionally, there is that sort of shrinkage. But what we did is we took the security guys and we actually sort of seconded them to some of the teams that we were creating for a short period of time. And there's like a part of the 80-20 rule. There's kind of like an osmosis where 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the things, if you like. So by osmosis, that information, just by putting that security person in that team, transferred some of that skills. So our cross-skilled team, we'd already cross-skilled it with development and IT operations and testing capability, had now become further cross-skilled with security. So that 6-week wait now dropped to a matter of hours or days, and sometimes there'd be a longer wait because it wasn't in that bit that had kind of osmosed over. But that's an example from a small credit card based bank that I was working with in the UK. But I wonder, Avinash, what real world stories would you like to share with the audience about those kind of actualities and real measurable improvements that DevOps implementation has resulted in?
I'll make one observation about what you just said, and then I promise I will answer that question. A lot of people sometimes wonder, is it DevOps or is it DevSecOps? And I think you just answer that very, very beautifully, right? That you've got development, you've got operations, and you've got security. And particularly if you're working in regulated industries, security is or can be a gate that is often seen as hindering speed. And which is where DevOps needs to become DevSecOps, because you've got to bring the sec thinking into the pipeline, and it's not something that you do post fact, or there's one that's a scary number, the 1 for 100 developers, but you have to build that into the pipeline. Now, from a real world example perspective, it's no longer a technical problem. The limitations that hold companies back is rarely on the technology. It's rarely on the tools. God knows they're spending enough on tools, right? It's in the way people think about the entire flow. And I keep coming back to flow because I just think it's so much at the heart of what we all want to accomplish. A lot of times, people looking at the entire process end to end aren't thinking in terms of what's the global optima. We've often created these local optima, where we say this team has these tools. They publish nice reports that says, here's the progress we made. This is what we used to do in the past. We've got DevOps now. Here's what we're doing now. And then there is, in the real world, a pressure that comes at the organization level where there's a push for standardization. And often people say that, hey, you know what, I've got these great tools, but there's another group that demands that we all use the same thing. Right. And that's one challenge that I often see when I go into organizations, and people say, what's the right trade-off? Right? Should we allow each team to do exactly what they please? Should there be one central team that's really governing all the tools and practices in DevOps? I think, like most things in life, it's a Goldilocks problem. There is a just enough between the two. In the real world, what I think you'll see is that there will be a tension between teams saying this is what is ideal for us, works best for us, and the organization saying we want some measure of commonality. And I'm sympathetic a little bit to that, because you want to be able to identify great things that individual teams are doing and then propagate that across the organization, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Making local discoveries, global optimization. So yeah, sharing, surfacing success. Absolutely.
Right. I
Yeah.
think too, in terms of real world success stories, the influence of DevOps on IT service management has been pretty profound. Organizations, for the most part, completely eliminate the notion of CAB, change advisory board. Organizations break down these traditional three-tier incident resolution structures. They're too slow. They represent constraints. And so it really, DevOps did a great job, right, of challenging the IT service management community to really rethink traditional service management. And that all then fed into that ability to, to speed things up and to also, again, respect the fact that when folks are doing DevOps right, we really are increasing quality and stability and like we are in fact getting it all. And if we're not, then let's look upstream and figure out why not.
I mean, totally agree with what Donna and Avinash said. I think I'll also talk about. I mean, I have many stories, many success stories about DevOps, but there's one specific initiative I was reading, and I'll probably talk about that a bit. And that also would align to something that Avinash was talking about, like do we make it centralized or not? Okay, so let me talk about this initiative I was part of, right? It was a big DevSecOps, or it was a DevSecOps transformation initiative, and interestingly, it won the best industry transformation award by DevOps Dozen, the award by DevOps Institute in 2022. So this was a path-breaking initiative, and I for sure wanted to talk about it because it's a big real-life example. Now, this company is a very big fintech company. Okay, it's an industry leader, and they wanted to modernize their SDLC process. That means their software delivery lifecycle processes through DevSecOps. Okay, on its entirety. So, I mean, it was a big initiative. There were like 50 products. Okay, I mean, 49 to be precise. There were 49 products that we had to transform, and now we're talking about a lot of applications, right? When you're talking about 49 products, and all of these products were built in various platforms across various technologies. Okay, so you have, I mean, if I go deep, you can talk about .NET, Java, Core Fusion, like Angular, and then they're deployed across in AIX, in Windows machines, in Linux, Unix machines. So there was a plethora of platforms as well as technologies that we had to take care of and tackle. And then we also had to ensure that the way the products are delivered, because some of the products are delivered directly to the customer and they are deployed in the customer premises. Some of the products are hosted, which the customers access directly. So that there is that challenge as well, because you don't want to break the cycle or disrupt the processes that you do today of how you deliver things to the customer. That had to still stay intact. So taking all of that into consideration, right, we started with building a center of excellence team. We thought, okay, we start from there, but then we understood that, okay, that probably wouldn't fit in for that organization. So then we decided to form a C4E team, Center for Excellence team, wherein although the rules and the guidance and the policies would be defined centrally, we will give some sort of latitude and empowerment to every business team that owns a product to make their own changes and slightly deviate from the actual centralized process. So that's how we started in terms of how the process would be. And we were able to build a complete continuous integration with a lot of automation throughout the cycle. All security scans I talked about before, open policy agent I talked about. We had continuous testing, all sort of continuous testing, functional, smoke, performance. We also had a performance gating tool that we used to do perf gating. Okay, and then we were able to take the artifact and automatically do deployment until the highest environment. Also apply a value chain and deliver the product to the customers through a portal. That process still stayed intact. So all of this in total was automated. It was a big team, big initiative, right? And while doing, we also saw that initially when we looked into the products, some of these products were using like different kind of tools. So what we decided was the central team would design a framework that would have a set of tools. So we predefined the set of tools, rationalized the whole process and the set of tools, so that there is some sort of cost saving over there as well. And finally, they always say if you can't measure, I mean, if you can't measure something, you can't improve. So how did we I mean, how can we even say that, okay, what we have done is path breaking, is changing our lives? And for that, we actually initially we built a dashboard which was based out of Dora matrices. And then we used another product that is in the market, and we integrated, we built the whole backend for it. That allows anyone to visualize and see how good or bad are we doing in terms of the Dora metrics, and I'll probably come to it later. But those were some of the key things that we did, and the immediate outcome that we see was there was 70% increase on the CI lead time. That means time to market to complete the continuous integration process. There was around 20, I mean, precisely 19% increase in the, or sorry, reduction in the deployment lead time. Since we started fostering reusability through C4E, there was a significant 30 plus percentage reduction in the time to build newer pipelines. And we also saw approximately 20% decrease in the cost because of the tool rationalization. So those were some of the key things, in terms of number. But again, like there are some benefits which are not exactly quantifiable always, right? So if I talk about them, we saw a higher emphasis on reuse. The products had a clear pathway for cloud adoption because DevOps made sure that that pathway was built for them. There was a standard process across the organization, and it made everything very standardized and consistent. The talent needs became less complicated because now you don't have to hire for people who know like X number of tools, because the framework is defined, the number of tools are lesser, right? We saw a huge amount of collaboration between teams because now everybody's end goal was to make sure that the product goes with pristine quality and security. So there was a lot of collaboration. We were able to break silos, right? And finally, there was a standard metrics for executives to to see through that lens and measure how their teams are doing. I mean, we had made sure that the dashboard is is visible and is relevant to an engineer, to a mid-level manager, and to an executive. I mean, there were different views, but then the idea was to make sure that we have it published and everybody is able to see how well they're doing. So this was a big initiative, but I wanted to talk about it because we saw a
Yeah.
huge amount of improvements across the board.
Fantastic, with so many
Helen,
different
if I may.
elements to it. Can I just
Yes.
we are just over halfway through, so I'm sure we are triggering lots of thoughts in the audience of how they can make improvements. So if you are thinking about your next steps, we are offering 30% off this summer on all DevOps Institute certifications. So we're going to drop the link in the chat for you now. We also have a number of questions that I want to link together shortly to do with basically the makeup of different teams and the relationship between development and operations. So Avinash, if you could say what you're going to say and then let me come back to that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. The COE pattern that Devashish just spoke about is a very popular pattern. And obviously, he described an organization that is adopting DevOps at scale. But even if you're starting out, don't let that intimidate you. I think the key focus is to continually make improvements and then incorporate those improvements into your pipelines, right? So that you can move to the next stage of improvements. And even at that level, a lot of the things that Devashi spoke about in terms of the COE absolutely makes sense, that you have people who are dedicated to making these improvements. And to Helen's point, an important part of this whole puzzle is not to have a Tower of Babel situation, right? That everybody uses these words in the same manner, and that's where it really helps to have a similar adopt a common vocabulary and a common training, and that really helps set a foundation for DevOps.
Yeah, beautiful. So a few questions then. Someone's asked if people are working in DevOps areas or some people prefer sticking to either development or operations. Someone else has said, as an IT service transition manager working in a traditional ITIL-based environment, we've recently onboarded an internal development team. What practical advice would you offer for transitioning to a DevOps or DevSecOps model? What challenges have you encountered in fostering effective collaboration between development and operation teams? Thanks. And then another question, we're currently using Biz DevOps, and I was wondering if anyone from the experts here have had some experience with it and what were the challenges you faced. So for me, there's a lot of similarity between these questions because what they're really asking about is organizational models. And there's an assumption in the first two questions that we're retaining separate development and IT operations teams, which it can be valid. Some people create DevOps teams. I was personally never a big fan of DevOps teams because what tends to happen is we created another team type. So we created another silo. I think it was Debs that mentioned silos earlier. And Avinash talks regularly about flow. What we're trying to do here is optimize flow across an organization. The first way of the three ways, of course, accelerating the flow from left to right, and doing that across silos. If we create another silo, we're creating more opportunities for waste and delay. But there are lots of different models, right? So let's ask the experts, or maybe the other experts, their opinions on this as well. So Donna, we haven't heard from you for a little while. What do you think about these things?
So let's start with do some people prefer sticking with DevOps? And I would say yes, absolutely. There are some people. But I think if we look at the way the world is today and how fast things are changing, the way you create a sustainable career is that you learn as much as you can about different areas of a business. And that might be not only different areas within IT, Dev and Ops, but actually working in the business units to better understand what goes on in that part of the organization. For anybody who doesn't know the history of DevOps, Patrick Dubois, who coined the term, had a career goal to work in every different area in IT over the you know, uh, length of his career. And so I think that's what is will let people have a sustainable career if they're open to understanding different areas of IT. And even I'll speak for myself, you know, I've been a practitioner, I've been a consultant, I've been a trainer, right? So have using your skills and knowledge and sharing their skills and knowledge in different ways even will give you a very sustainable career. And I'm an educator, so I'm going to bring it all home by saying it's all rooted in education. Being a lifelong learner, for the folks who have a traditional idle-based environment, learn about Agile, learn about Lean, learn about DevOps. It absolutely will shift how you think about IT service management, and you will come to very quickly understand, as I did early on when I was researching DevOps Foundation, if IT service management doesn't change in response to DevOps, people will just start working around you. They'll find a way around you. So you have to get engaged with that community and really understand the why of what's going on in these adjacent frameworks. I would include site reliability engineering in there as well. So, and to just reinforce what Avinash said, having that common language, really understanding what is DevOps, what is Agile, what is Lean, what is the why behind all of this, will always serve you as an individual, and I think it will serve organizations well going forward.
Yeah. And Donna, like to continue to what you were saying, right? I think, and I'll also piggyback to one of the questions that is there. I mean, you know, the question is all about how do you transition, right, into DevOps. I think we always say, you know, start small, and that's what I'll say. One of the key things is I talked about people, and you talked about the same thing, you know, people being primary. So you start by empowering your development teams. I am also not a big fan of having a separate DevOps team. I mean, they should be together. So, you know, you start empowering people, give them latitude, right? And give them that sense of ownership that, okay, like, you know, we need to go there. So let's figure out how do we do it. And that's where it all begins. It all begins with a small conversation. Look at tools, look at what is there in the market, and start small. I would say look at your build process. Start start automating that one, because that is probably the key and the central core of what you're doing. And from there on, see what are your organizational aspirations, goals, and objectives, what your organization wants, you know, primarily, and based on that, you can see what else you can add to the pipeline and transition to proper, you know, DevOps or DevSecOps model. But, you know, I think it's always about fostering automation and collaboration between teams and letting them start early.
One thing that I've seen work quite well is that if you try to force together two different teams, especially if they're already set, it's hard, right? Because people are set and then they're resistant to not to learning, but to But the shift in their mindset is it's much harder that way if you try to force it. A much easier way, if not a better way, to do that is to task the teams together to achieve a certain outcome. And what I think happens in that is both the teams come together, you enable them with some of the trainings and the skills, and then together when they sit together and say, how do we make that happen? Automatically, you'll see a lot of the good practices of DevOps come in. Obviously, it doesn't come in a vacuum. You do need somebody who's at least making them aware of some of the patterns and the tools and the techniques that are available. But it doesn't have to be very heavy, right? Because a lot of the things that we're talking about is really a distillation of how to get things onto production, onto value very, very quickly.
Yeah, and Avinash, I think you spoke my mind. I didn't wanted my answer to be too long, so I didn't continue there. But yeah, I think that was something that I wanted to add on, especially like when you talk about ops, and I think like the question also talks about collaboration between dev and ops, right? And you touched upon it. One of the key things is rather than forcing that you said, right? We show or you as a leader show them the reflection of what lies ahead in the future. Now, if you go down this path, uh, how ops team would be able to kind of do away with some of the repetitive redundant tasks that they do daily that can be automated, and how they can invest their time on quality activities. Let's say show them that, okay, if you do this now, your next step would be AI ML ops, and the moment you go towards AI ops, you are looking at automatic incident resolution. You cannot do that unless this part is automated, because you need automated feedback to come in. And in order for continuous feedback to come in, you have to finish the initial steps of continuous integration deployment, and etc etc. So show them what lies ahead for them, how it is important for the organization's growth and also for their growth, because I feel every job that you take is a stepping stone for the next one, and there's always kind of skills that you can transfer. So transferable skills are very important, and even for the ops people, you need to show them that these are the transferable skills that you can develop once you take this first step. One last thing. I think there was one more question about biz DevOps, and I think Helen talked about all of them together. So I have some experience there because we've like worked for a company where it was biz DevOps. That was how they coined it. Um, I mean, I personally, I'm not a very big fan of that, because you're exactly building a separate tower that is only doing DevOps and business DevOps. But I think primarily, like, I've seen organizations that are very business focused and want your DevOps and engineers, sorry, I mean operations guys, to also solve actual business problems, give L1, L2, L3 support. Those are the companies that actually tend towards going in this direction, because they want their ops and DevOps people to understand business that well, that they should be able to solve actual customer business problems. Not a big fan, but yeah, I've seen that. I think one of the key learnings I had was there. You really need to invest a lot of time on domain training, whichever industry it is, like that you are a part of. Ivo, I think that's the person asking the question. You have to make sure that your DevOps guys are very, very highly skilled in the domain that they are on, if they really want to achieve, I mean, if you want to achieve success in that model where you have biz DevOps. That was one of the learning I wanted to share. Thank you.
We only have about 10 minutes left, and we do have some other questions that I'd like to get to, but I also feel like we'll be doing the audience a bit of disservice if we don't obviously talk about the hottest topic of 2025, AI and generative AI. So it's happening, isn't it? This isn't the future, this is a now. So let's talk about what's happening in our daily lives. Donna, what are you seeing happening in your world at the moment using these new technologies?
Well, so my focus tends to be on process engineering. And so there's tremendous benefit with AI to be able to really automatically understand how your processes are performing. It can help with producing documentation, which everybody in IT hates doing, but is a necessary component of things. Helping to develop knowledge management and all of the information that think about it. If you're very, very quickly making changes, how are you dragging all that documentation and all that information about that release, from dev into ops, and making sure that, hopefully we don't need a service desk, but if we do need a service desk, they have the information they need in order to handle incidents. I also think agentic AI is really changing the game in terms of enabling us to, automate different tasks and free people up to be creative and to be innovative, and to then kind of really be able to focus on what is important to the business, and helping the business to remain competitive long term. So there's just, it's one of those things that's been around for a long time, but the current iterations of it, generative AI, agentic AI, for the folks who are really leveraging them, are absolutely changing the game.
So when the rate at which some of these systems are improving is just phenomenal. So while you may look around today and say, hey, there's a lot of use cases that AI agents are picking up, which seem reasonably straightforward or reasonably simplistic today. But I assure you, 2 years later, it'll be a completely different scenario, because these agents are really improving at a phenomenal pace. What that means is that when you enable AI agents to take more and more decisions, right, then the way that they then operationalize those decisions is via these pipelines, and these will be the traditional application DevOps pipelines. They will be the ML pipelines, and the pressure to have these pipelines operate at an even higher level of speed and efficiency and accuracy is just going to increase with AI, because AI is going to demand that, because you are able to get insights at real time, that you are now able to respond to those insights in real time. And that just becomes a very nice self-reinforcing loop. And what that means is that progress on this is just going to accelerate.
Yeah, great thoughts, Donna and Avinash. I think you can do so much with AI, and you touched upon agentic AI. You can do so much with that. I'll add on to something. While I also answer a question that I see from Patadeshwar, he talked about, if DevOps team don't know coding, like, or they're not experts coders, like, how do you tackle it? And I think, yeah, AI is an answer, because one of my teams right now, as we speak, is using an AI tool to generate pipeline code day in and day out. Okay, that's one. And there's one more team that is experimenting on a new tool that is using agentic AI to help not only build pipelines, but also make sure there's an eye on the pipeline. You're looking at things like flaky testing. You're looking at things like, how do you optimize pipelines while they are already running. You're also looking at aspects and areas of pipelines that probably are not used that much, and is there a way they can be optimized again? And they're also looking at the usage by actual users, and based on that, giving us insights of what or how should we look at, like, from an organization perspective, on how developer experience is getting improved or can be improved. And that's all agentic AI. So there's a lot that AI can help with, and like, I think this is happening, as Helen said.
Absolutely. So let's finish up today. Let's think about the audience that we've got today, the kind of questions we've had, and what your key takeaways would be that you'd like to leave the audience with. And actually, Fabiola's just asked a great question, which I think is a great starting point to finish up with, which is, what advice would you give someone who's just starting out in their IT journey? And I think we can extend that question to IT and or DevOps journey. So Avinash, what are your key takeaways you would like to leave the audience with today?
The one thing that I would say is that there's just so much happening right now in terms of new capability becoming available. And that is different from new tooling being available. We've always lived in the last 20 years, there have always been new tools that have come in. Developers have learned new tools. But if you're starting off your career in IT, know that we are in an era where capability is becoming available to us on demand, on tap. And a lot of things that you're going to do is harness that capability in order to accelerate the delivery of business value. Companies are becoming sharper and sharper on the delivery, on the measurement of business value, and being able to adopt and play well with these capabilities is going to be fundamental to being successful in the long term.
Yeah. Fabulous. Debs, what about you? What are your key takeaways for the audience today?
Yeah, so I think we've spoken enough about the topics, right? So I'll just end it saying, DevOps is, no longer optional. It is foundational to staying relevant and competitive in the industry. And hence, if you're starting now, or you are like in the middle of your journey, or you're one of the you already pivoted in this area, you still have so much to learn, so much to adapt to. As Avinash said, technology and tools are changing. The jobs that are paying you the most today weren't existent like 5, 7 years back. And that's how fast the landscape and the ecosystem of this industry is changing. So, yeah, just stay relevant and, automate what you can.
Yeah. And Donna, you get the final word. What are the last thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with today?
So I would say what Deb said in a slightly different way. I think today we all have to master the art of unlearning a little bit, that there are just so many things, traditional ways of doing things that are now obsolete, or they're on their way to being obsolete. And so really getting good at continuously learning and understanding that education comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. It can be formal education that leads to a certification. It can be informal education. It can be asking ChatGPT what something is. So I think just channeling your like inner 5-year-old almost, like not being afraid to ask why, not being afraid to ask what. I think sometimes people are afraid to like admit that they don't know what something is, but quite frankly, everything is changing so quickly these days that on any given day, we're all like gonna hear some about some new technology or some new approach to work that we don't know what it is. So don't be afraid to just, reach out. This is what the IDLE ambassadors, the DevOps ambassadors, like the folks in this room, this is what we're here for. Reach out and ask, what is that? Help me understand that a little bit better.
So beautifully put. This is exactly what we're here for, to help the whole community learn. And I did answer a question earlier and say DevOps or die. And Deb's also said DevOps is not, it's not optional. You kind of have to do it. So I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much to the team and the audience. That does bring us to the end of today's webinar. So huge thank you to our speakers and panelists and all of you for joining us. We hope you walk away with a clear understanding how DevOps practices and the right certifications can truly transform how you work and deliver value. Don't forget, we do have the 30% offer of all the DevOps Institute certifications all summer. If you'd like to learn more, explore certification paths, or watch the recording, keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be following up soon. Until next time, take care, keep innovating, and let's give the panelists a chance to say goodbye to you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Everyone, see you somewhere sometime soon. Goodbye for now.
Good.